What are the major characteristics of all chordates?
All chordates share a notochord, dorsal nerve cord, and pharyngeal gill pouches. The notochord, a cartilaginous supporting rod, runs along the dorsal part of the body. It is always found in embryos, but in most vertebrates it is replaced during development by a backbone of bony or cartilaginous vertebrae. The tubular dorsal nerve cord, dorsal to the notochord, is formed during development by an enfolding of the ectoderm. In vertebrates, the nerve cord eventually becomes encased and thus protected by the backbone. The pharyngeal gill pouches appear during embryonic development on both sides of the throat region, the pharynx.
How dangerous is Clostridium botulinum?
The bacterium Clostridium botulinum can grow in food products and produce a toxin called botulinum, the most toxic substance known. Microbiologists estimate that 1 gram of this toxin can kill 14 million adults. This bacterium can withstand boiling water, 212 degrees Fahrenheit or 100 degrees Celsius, but is killed in 5 minutes at 248 degrees Fahrenheit 120 degrees Celsius. This tolerance makes Clostridium botulinum a serious concern for people who can vegetables at home. If home canning is not done properly, this bacterium will grow in the anaerobic conditions of the sealed container and create extremely poisonous food. The endospores of Clostridium botulinum can germinate in poorly prepared canned goods. So individuals should never eat food from a can that appears swollen, as it is a sign that the can has become filled with gas released during germination. Consuming food from a can containing endospores that have undergone germination can lead to nerve paralysis, severe vomiting, and even death.
When was the EPA created and what does it do?
In 1970, President Richard M. Nixon, 1913 to 1994, signed an executive order that created the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, as an independent agency of the U.S. government. The creation of a federal agency by executive order rather than by an act of the legislative branch is somewhat uncommon. The EPA was established in response to public concern about unhealthy air, polluted rivers and groundwater, unsafe drinking water, endangered species, and hazardous waste disposal. Responsibilities of the EPA include environmental research, monitoring, and enforcement of legislation regulating environmental activities. The EPA also manages the cleanup of toxic chemical sites as part of a program known as Superfund.
What was the first group of vertebrates?
The first vertebrates were fishes that appeared 500 million years ago. They were agnathans, from the Greek terms a, meaning without, and gnath, meaning jaw, small. Jawless fishes up to about 8 in, 20 centimeters, long and also known as ostracoderms, shell skin. Because their bodies were covered with bony plates, most notably a head shield protecting the brain.
What is a pedigree?
A pedigree is a genetic history of a family, which shows the inheritance of traits through several generations. Information that can be obtained from a pedigree includes birth order, sex of children, twins, marriages, deaths, stillbirths, and pattern of inheritance of specific genetic traits.
What is meant by genetic determinism?
Genetic determinism is a theory proposing that behavior and character are entirely shaped by genes. Since only genetic material passes from one generation to the next, it seemed logical at one time to assume that all of our traits, physical, behavioral, psychological, were the result of gene sequences. More recent and extensive research has demonstrated the importance of environmental factors in determining how or which genes are actually involved in the development of the individual.
Do animals ever run out of energy?
Because the amount of energy available to an animal at any particular trophic level is limited by the distance between that level and primary producers. Animals can obtain only a finite amount of energy from their habitats. Therefore, over evolutionary time, species make concessions in terms of their lifestyle attributes in order to best utilize their limited resources. Examples of items within the energy budget are activities like reproduction, growth, and maintenance. While the energy expended on growth and reproduction can remain in the system as biomass, the energy used for maintenance is lost as heat.
What plants produce essential oils that are commonly used in aromatherapy?
Aromatherapy is a holistic approach to healing using essential oils extracted from plants. Holistic medicine looks at the health of the whole individual, and treatments emphasize the connection of mind, body, and spirit. The term aromatherapy was first used by René Gattefossé, a French perfume chemist. He discovered the healing powers of lavender oil following a laboratory accident during which he burned his hand. Gattefossé began to investigate the properties of lavender oil and other essential oils and published a book on plant extracts. During aromatherapy treatments, essential oils are absorbed through breath or the pores of the skin. This process triggers certain physiological responses.
What is the current model of the plasma membrane?
The current model, frequently referred to as the fluid mosaic model, is based on work completed by Seymour J. Singer, 1924, and Garth L. Nicholson, 1943, in 1972. Their research revealed that the plasma membrane is a mosaic of integral proteins bobbing in a fluid bilayer of phospholipids. This pattern is not static because the positions of the proteins are constantly changing, moving about like icebergs in a sea of lipids. Peripheral proteins are not embedded in the lipid bilayer, but are appendages loosely bound to the membrane surface. Membrane carbohydrates on the surface function as cell markers to distinguish one cell from another. This model has been tested repeatedly and has been shown to accurately predict the properties of many kinds of cellular membranes. This structure has also been confirmed using a technique known as freeze fracture electron microscopy.
What is unique about egg incubation in some amphibians?
Unlike most toads and frogs, the female Suriname toad, Pipa pipa, carries her eggs in special pockets in the skin on her back. Each egg develops in its own pocket in the female's skin. The tadpole's tails are plugged into the mother's system. Similar to the placenta of mammals, exchanging nutrients and gases. The tadpoles develop quickly, undergoing metamorphosis while still in the pockets. Upon transformation into miniature frogs, they break free of their pocket walls to begin independent lives.
What are archaebacteria?
Archaebacteria, domain Archaea, are primitive bacteria that often live in extreme environments. This domain includes the following: 1. Thermophils, heat lovers, which live in very hot environments, including the hot sulfur springs of Yellowstone National Park, which reach temperatures ranging from 140 to 176 degrees Fahrenheit, 60 to 80 degrees Celsius. 2. Halophils, salt lovers, which live in locations with high concentrations of salinity, such as the Great Salt Lake in Utah, which has salinity levels that range from 15 to 20%. Seawater normally has a level of salinity of 3%. 3. Methanogens, which obtain their energy by using hydrogen gas, H2, to reduce carbon dioxide, CO2, to methane gas, CH4.
What is a control group?
A control group is the experimental group tested without changing the variable. For example, to determine the effect of temperature on seed germination. One group of seeds may be heated to a certain temperature. The researcher will then compare the percent of seeds in this group that germinate and the time it takes them to germinate to another group of seeds, the control group, that have not been heated. All other variables, such as light and water, will remain the same for each group.
Are Rickettsia and Chlamydia bacteria or viruses?
For many years, Rickettsia and Chlamydia were thought to be viruses because they are very small and are intracellular parasites. They are now known to be bacteria because they possess both DNA and RNA, have cell walls similar to those found in gram-negative bacteria, divide by binary fission, and are susceptible to antibiotics that produce an effect in most bacteria.
What is the difference between short-day plants and long-day plants?
Short-day and long-day plants exhibit a response to photoperiodism, or the changes in light and dark in a 24-hour cycle. Short-day plants form flowers when the days become shorter than a critical length, while long-day plants form flowers when the days become longer than a critical length. Short-day plants bloom in late summer or autumn in middle latitudes. Examples of short-day plants are chrysanthemums, goldenrods, poinsettias, soybeans, and ragweed. Long-day plants bloom in spring and early summer. Some examples of long-day plants are clover, irises, and hollyhocks. Florists and commercial plant growers can adjust the amount of light a plant receives to force it to bloom out of season.
What is a gene gun?
The gene gun, developed by Cornell University plant scientists, is a method of direct gene transfer that is used in plant biotechnology. In order to transfer genes into plants, gold or tungsten microspheres, 1 micrometer in diameter, are coated with DNA from a specific gene. The microspheres are then accelerated toward target cells, contained in a petri dish, at high speed. Once inside the target cells, the DNA on the outside of the microsphere is released and can be incorporated into the plant's genome. This method is also known as microprojectile bombardment or biolistics. The survival rate of bombarded cells varies with the rate of penetration. For example, if the particle penetration rate reaches 21 per cell, approximately 80% of bombarded cells may die.
What is a biomedic?
A biomimetic is a chemical reagent that can perform the function of a biological molecule. An example is a small molecular mimic of erythropoietin, the protein that causes release of red blood cells. Dolly the sheep was the first mammal to be successfully cloned.
What is Darwin's warm pond?
Darwin's idea of a suitable milieu for the origin of life on Earth was a little pond gently warmed by sunlight. This can be contrasted to the Oparin-Haldane hypothesis of an electrically active methane and carbon dioxide atmosphere for the origin of organic evolution.
What is a climax community?
Terrestrial communities of organisms move through a series of stages from bare earth or rock to forests of mature trees. This last stage is described as the climax because it is thought that, if left undisturbed, communities can remain in this stage in perpetuity. However, more recent studies suggest that climax may be only one part of a continuous cycle of successional stages in these communities.
How are hazardous waste materials classified?
There are 4 types of hazardous waste materials: corrosive, ignitable, reactive, and toxic. Corrosive materials can wear away or destroy a substance. Most acids are corrosive and can destroy metal, burn skin, and give off vapors that burn the eyes. Ignitable materials can burst into flames easily. These materials pose a fire hazard and can irritate the skin, eyes, and lungs. Gasoline, paint, and furniture polish are ignitable. Reactive materials can explode or create poisonous gas when combined with other chemicals. Combining chlorine, bleach, and ammonia, for example, creates a poisonous gas. Toxic materials or substances can poison humans and other life. They can cause illness or death if swallowed or absorbed through the skin. Pesticides and household cleaning agents are toxic.
What is Terminator gene technology?
This is a method of biotechnology in which crops that are bioengineered for a specific desirable trait, such as drought resistance, would contain a lethal gene that would cause any seeds produced by the plant to be non-viable. The lethal gene could be activated by spraying with a solution sold by the same company that originally marketed the bioengineered plant. Thus, the plants would still provide seeds with nutritional value. But these seeds could not be used to produce new plants. This technique would allow companies to control the product's genes. so that they would not spread into the general plant population. Seeds would have to be purchased by the grower for each season.
What is aneuploidy?
Cell division that results in an unequal separation of genetic material creates aneuploid. From the Greek terms an, meaning not, eu, meaning true, and ploid, meaning number, cells. Examples would be human cells with 47 or 45 chromosomes. For a diploid organism, aneuploidy is usually written algebraically as 2n plus 1 or 2n1, indicating an odd number of genes.
Who is considered the father of zoology?
Aristotle, 384 to 322 b. CE, is considered the father of zoology. His contributions to zoology include vast quantities of information about the variety, structure, and behavior of animals. The analysis of the parts of living organisms, and the beginnings of the science of taxonomy.
What are chaperone proteins?
While most proteins fold spontaneously into their specific conformation, some require the help of other molecules to achieve this. Chaperone proteins guide newly synthesized polypeptides into their functional three-dimensional shape.
How many species of plants and animals are threatened or endangered in the United States?
The total number of U.S. species listed as endangered by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is 990, 391 animals, 599 plants. The total number of U.S. species listed as threatened is 275, 128 animals, 147 plants.
How can speciation occur?
If a population becomes reproductively isolated, then individuals within the population will no longer exchange genetic material with the rest of the species. At that point, environmental factors, i.e., natural selection, will work on the genetic variation within that population until it has become a new species.
Why are fungi disappearing?
Gourmets with a taste for the subtle flavors of fresh, wild mushrooms are discovering that those delicacies are increasingly hard to find. in Europe, just a few years ago. It was easy to pick a basket of one of the most prized fungi, the apricot chanterelle. However, not only are these mushrooms becoming scarce, the ones that do grow wildly do not grow to the same size they once did. In 1975 it took 50 times more chanterelles to make up 2.2 pounds, 1 kilogram, than it did in 1958. Other fungi are also becoming rare. For example, the average number of fungal species per 120 square yards, 1,000 square meters, in the Netherlands has dropped from 37 to 12. One reason for this decline has been an increase in air pollution. Fungi are more sensitive to air pollution than plants because fungi have no protective covering, whereas the aerial parts of plants are protected by cuticles and bark. In addition, while plants extract water from soil using their roots, some fungi absorb water directly from the atmosphere, along with the pollution that may be present in the air. Poor air quality contributes to the decline of fungi.
What is unusual about the stinkhorn fungus Dictyophora?
The stinkhorn fungus Dictyophora indusiata is one of the world's fastest growing organisms. It pushes out of the ground at a rate of about 0.2 in, 0.5 centimeters, per minute. The growth rate is so fast that a crackling sound can be heard as the tissues of the fungus swell and stretch. During growth, a delicate, net-like veil forms around the fungus, giving this fungus its common name, the Lady of the Veil. The fungus then decomposes and in the process produces a strong odor that is similar to the smell of decaying flesh. This odor attracts flies that crawl over the fungus and collect its spores on their feet. This process ensures that the spores are carried to new areas. Although the odor produced by species of Dictyophora is quite unpleasant, members of this genus are considered delicacies in China, where they are marketed as aphrodisiacs.
What are isomers?
Isomers are compounds with the same molecular formula but differing atomic structure within their molecules. The atoms of structural isomers are connected in different ways. Geometric isomers differ in their symmetry about a double bond. Optical isomers are mirror images of each other.
What happens to proteins during a hair perm?
During a hair perm, the bonds that form the secondary and tertiary levels of structure in the protein keratin, the major protein of hair, are chemically broken and then reformed. Hydrogen bonds are primarily involved in this process. The same principle, breaking and forming bonds, is used to make hair either very curly or very straight.
Who invented the electron microscope?
The theoretical and practical limits to the use of the optical microscope were set by the wavelength of light. When the oscilloscope was developed, it was realized that cathode ray beams could be used to resolve much finer detail because their wavelength was so much shorter than that of light. In 1928 Ernst Ruska, 1906 to 1988, and Max Knoll, 1897 to 1969, using magnetic fields to focus electrons in a cathode ray beam, produced a crude instrument that gave a magnification of 17, and by 1932 they had developed an electron microscope having a magnification of 400. By 1937 James Hillier, 1915, had advanced this magnification to 7,000. The 1939 instrument Vladimir Zworykin, 1889 to 1982, developed gave 50 times more detail than any optical microscope ever could, with a magnification up to 2 million. The electron microscope revolutionized biological research. For the first time scientists could see the molecules of cell structures, proteins, and viruses.
How is a gene library made?
To create a gene library, scientists extract the DNA of a specific organism and use restriction endonucleases to cut it. The scientists then insert the resulting fragments into vectors and make multiple copies of the fragments. The number of clones needed for a genomic library depends on the size of the genome and the size of the DNA fragments. Specific clones in the library are located using a DNA probe.
Why is photosynthesis important?
Ultimately, photosynthesis is the process that provides food for the entire world. Each year more than 250 billion metric tons of sugar are created through photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is a source of food not only for plants, but also all organisms that are not capable of internally producing their own food, including humans.
What wood is used to make baseball bats?
Wooden baseball bats are made from white ash, Fraxinus americana. This wood is ideal for producing bats because it is tough and light, and can thus help drive a ball a great distance. A tree roughly 75 years old and 15.7 in, 40 centimeters, in diameter can produce approximately 60 bats.
What is the significance of on the origin of species?
Charles Darwin, 1809 to 1882, first proposed a theory of evolution based on natural selection in his treatise on the origin of species. The publication of On the Origin of Species ushered in a new era in our thinking about the nature of man. The intellectual revolution it caused and the impact it had on man's concept of himself and the world were greater than those caused by the works of Isaac Newton, 1642 to 1727, and other individuals. The effect was immediate. The first edition sold out on the day of publication, November 24, 1859. Origin has been referred to as the book that shook the world. Every modern discussion of man's future, the population explosion, the struggle for existence, the purpose of man and the universe, and man's place in nature rests on Darwin. The work was a product of his analyses and interpretations of his findings from his voyages on the HMS Beagle. In Darwin's day, the prevailing explanation for organic diversity was the story of creation in the book of Genesis in the Bible. Origin was the first publication to present scientifically sound, well-organized evidence for the theory of evolution. Darwin's theory was based on natural selection in which the best or fittest individuals survive more often than those who are less fit. If there is a difference in the genetic endowment among these individuals that correlates with fitness, the species will change over time and will eventually resemble more closely, as a group, the fittest individuals. It is a two-step process. The first consists of the production of variation, and the second of the sorting of this variability by natural selection, in which the favorable variations tend to be preserved.
What is a gene probe?
A gene probe is a specific segment of single-strand DNA that is complementary to a desired gene. For example, if the gene of interest contains the sequence OTKaka, then the probe will contain the complementary sequence TACT. When added to the appropriate solution, the probe will match and then bind to the gene of interest. To facilitate locating the probe, scientists usually label it with a radioisotope or a fluorescent dye so that it can be visualized and identified.
What are some of the best known deuteromycetes?
Deuteromycetes are mostly free-living and terrestrial, but some are pathogenic. The best-known pathogenic deuteromycetes include the causal agent, Aspergillus niger, of a respiratory disease called aspergillosis, athlete's foot, Epidermophyton floccosum. Ringworm, Microsporum canis, and Candida yeast infection, Candida albicans. Some other famous deuteromycetes are species of the genus Penicillium, particularly P. notatum, for the role it played in the discovery of penicillin, P. chrysogenum, for the commercial production of penicillin, P. grisofulvum, for the production of grisofulvin. an effective antibiotic against ringworm and athlete's foot, NP. Roquefort and P. Camembert, which are used to make Roquefort and Camembert cheeses, respectively.
How can genes be used to detect multi-gene disorders?
DNA chips and microarray technology can be used as a diagnostic tool when searching for multiple mutations that can be part of a multi-gene disease, such as some types of cancers. DNA chip technology is now being used to screen for mutations in the p53 gene. Approximately 60% of all cancers are linked to mutations of the p53 gene. Eventually, these methods will be used to collectively generate an individual genetic profile of all mutations associated with known genetic disorders.
How many nuclear pores are there in a nucleus?
A typical nucleus in a mammalian cell has 3,000 to 4,000 pores or 10 to 20 pores per square micrometer, m. Nuclear pores are not merely perforations, but channels composed of more than 100 different proteins.
What is the carbon cycle?
To survive, every organism must have access to carbon atoms. Carbon makes up about 49% of the dry weight of organisms. The carbon cycle includes movement of carbon from the gaseous phase. Carbon dioxide CO2 in the atmosphere, to solid phase. Carbon-containing compounds in living organisms, and then back to the atmosphere via decomposers. The atmosphere is the largest reservoir of carbon, containing 32% CO2. Biological processes on land shuttle carbon between atmospheric and terrestrial compartments, with photosynthesis removing CO2 from the atmosphere and cell respiration returning CO2 to the atmosphere.
How has dill been used throughout history?
Dill has long been used for medicinal purposes. The Egyptians used dill, Anethum graveolens, as a soothing medicine. Greeks habitually used the herb to cure the hiccups. During the Middle Ages, dill was prized for the protection it purportedly provided against witchcraft. Magicians and alchemists used dill to concoct spells. While a commonly known wives' tale stated that dill added to wine could enhance passion, colonial settlers brought dill to North America, where it became known as meat seed. Because children were given dill seed to chew during long sermons in church.
What products are produced by fermentation?
Fermentation is important in the production of wine, beer, soy sauce, baked products, and pickles.
How do muscle cells use calcium?
Calcium ions are stored inside muscle cells. The calcium ions are released when a muscle cell gets a signal to induce contraction, which initiates the movement of the contractile proteins within muscles. When calcium concentrations fall, muscle contractions stop.
How do animals recognize each other?
We know that animals can use scent, color, and sound to recognize individuals. And they may also be able to recognize other attributes as well. A recent study on sheep intelligence indicates that easily herded animals may be smarter than originally thought. The sheep were shown pictures of other sheep and were subsequently rewarded if they moved toward a selected picture. The sheep learned which face produced a reward. Ultimately, it was shown that sheep were able to pick a selected picture 80% of the time and could remember up to 50 images for 2 years.
What is green fluorescent protein?
Green fluorescent protein is a protein found in a luminescent jellyfish, Aquaria victoria, that lives in the cold waters of the northern Pacific. Bioluminescence is the production of light by living organisms. These jellyfish contain two proteins: a bioluminescent protein called equorin that emits blue light, and an accessory green fluorescent protein, GFP. However, what we actually see when the jellyfish fluoresces is the conversion of the blue light emitted by equorin to a green light, a metabolic reaction facilitated by the GFP. Since GFP is simply a protein, it is often used both as a marker for gene transfer and for localization of proteins. There are a variety of green fluorescent proteins that can glow different colors.
How do plant cells use carbon dioxide?
Plant cells reduce carbon dioxide to sugar by using the electrons that are produced when chlorophyll absorbs light. 6 carbon dioxide, CO2, molecules, along with 6 water H2O, molecules, can be converted into a simple sugar, C6H12O6.
What does it mean to be the alpha male?
In animal groups with multiple individuals, those at the top of the dominance hierarchy are designated as the alpha male and alpha female. Those next in line would be the beta individuals, using the nomenclature of the Greek alphabet. Alpha individuals control the behavior of the other animals, and may be the only individuals that mate within the group. They may also be the decision makers, as in determining which direction the group travels, where the group sleeps, and so forth.
Which plants most commonly form ectomycorrhizal relationships?
The most common plants associated with ectomycorrhiza are trees and shrubs growing in temperate regions. These trees include pines, firs, oaks, beeches, and willows. These plants tend to be more resistant to extreme temperatures, drought, and other harsh environmental conditions. Some ectomycorrhizal fungi may provide protection from acidic precipitation.
Why is RNA an unstable molecule?
Not all forms of RNA are unstable. Messenger RNA, mRNA, molecules, however, can vary in their stability, depending on their rate of degradation and synthesis in cells and the amount of a particular protein needed.
What plant native to Central and South America can be used as both a poison and a healing remedy?
Chondrodendron tomentosum, a plant that produces curare, has properties that are both healing and poisonous. In both Central and South America, the plant has been used by many different Indian tribes to develop a poisonous mixture. The poisonous stems and roots of the plant are crushed and cooked until taking on a syrupy consistency. Indian tribes often dip the tips of arrows and other weapons into the poisonous paste before battle. However, the root of the vine also has healing properties. In Brazil, especially, it is used as a diuretic and fever reducer and is commonly used to treat tissue inflammation, kidney stones, bruises, contusions, and edema.
What is the difference between altricial and precocial offspring?
Altricial and precocial are terms used to describe the development of young birds at hatching. Hatchlings that are able to find and consume their own food and have at least minimal anti-predator defenses are described as precocial. Offspring requiring extensive parental care, like humans, are altricial. Examples of precocial non-mammalian species include chickens and the young of game birds. Examples of altricial non-mammalian species include songbirds, woodpeckers, and hummingbirds.
What parts of plants are sources for spices?
Spices are aromatic seasonings derived from many different parts of plants including the bark, buds, fruit, roots, seeds, and stems.
What is molecular evolution?
The study of molecular evolution is the study of how proteins and nucleic acids change with time. Early studies on evolution were based on biogeography and the fossil record. As scientists developed techniques for studying DNA and proteins, evolutionary researchers soon followed their lead. Molecular evolution involves two broad areas: how the forces at work on individuals, e.g., natural selection, sexual selection, affect gene sequences and proteins, and how entire genomes evolve.
Is IQ genetically controlled?
This is actually two questions. First, can intelligence be measured quantitatively? And second, is there a correlation between intelligence and certain genotypes? Both questions can be answered in the negative. As our definition of intelligence has evolved, it has become more difficult to assign a single number to the trait of intelligence. Therefore, it is almost impossible to demonstrate which gene sequences correlate to high IQ values. Even though our understanding of the genome is broadening, so too is our definition of intelligence. It becomes less and less likely that we will be able to find one or two genes that determine all of the facets of intelligence. Considering the importance of environment in determining phenotype, IQ is most likely a multifactorial trait.
What is the purpose of a mordant?
A mordant is a chemical added to the solution used to stain a specimen in order to intensify the stain. Two major functions of a mordant are to increase the affinity of a stain for a biological specimen, and to coat a structure to make it thicker and easier to see upon observation under the microscope.
What is the cell theory?
The cell theory is the concept that as all living things are made up of essential units called cells, they are the fundamental components of all life. The cell is the simplest collection of matter that can live. There are diverse forms of life existing as single-celled organisms. More complex organisms, including plants and animals, are multicellular cooperatives composed of diverse specialized cells that could not survive for long on their own. All cells come from pre-existing cells and are related by division to earlier cells that have been modified in various ways during the long evolutionary history of life on Earth. Everything an organism does occurs fundamentally at the cellular level.
Do animal societies have a culture?
Culture can be defined as the set of societal rules that are passed from one generation to the next. Parents or caregivers teach juveniles what they need to know in order to participate in their society. This phenomenon has been noted among non-human primates and elephants as well as other species. Elephant families rely on memory and the knowledge of the matriarch. Oldest female, to respond to social cues. The matriarch controls the direction in which the herd moves, and where and for how long feeding occurs. When there is danger, the other herd members cluster around the matriarch. Perhaps most striking is the tender loving care lavished on young elephants. The bond between mother and daughter elephants lasts up to 50 years.
What is a reflex?
A reflex is an involuntary response formulated in the spinal cord to a specific stimulus.
Why is the yeast Saccharomyces cerevisiae important in genetic research?
Biologists have studied Saccharomyces cerevisiae, a yeast used by bakers and brewers for many decades because it offers valuable clues to aid in the understanding of how more advanced organisms work. For example, humans and yeast share a number of similarities in their genetic makeup. The DNA present in certain regions of yeast contains stretches of DNA subunits that are nearly identical to those in human DNA. These similarities indicate that humans and yeast both have similar genes that play a critical role in cell function. In 1996, an international consortium of scientists from the United States, Canada, Europe, and Japan completed the genome sequence, all 12,057,500 subunits contained in the nuclear DNA of S. cerevisiae. It is the first eukaryotic organism to be completely sequenced. With their rapid generation time, yeasts continue to be the organism of choice. To provide significant insights into the functioning of eukaryotic systems,
What is the fastest growing land plant?
bamboo, Bambusa spp. Native to tropical and subtropical regions of Southeast Asia and islands of the Pacific and Indian Oceans. Is the plant that gains height most quickly. Bamboo can grow almost 3 feet 1 meter in 24 hours. This rapid growth is produced partly by cell division and partly by cell enlargement.
Who discovered the Golgi apparatus?
In 1898, Camillo Golgi, 1843 to 1926, an Italian physician, first described an irregular network of small fibers, cavities, and granules in nerve cells. It was not until the 1940s, and the invention of the electron microscope, that the existence of the Golgi apparatus was confirmed. In 1906, Golgi and Santiago Ramón y Cajal, 1852–1934, were awarded the Nobel Prize for Physiology or Medicine for their investigations into the fine structure of the nervous system.
What is the ladder of nature?
Aristotle, 384–322b. CE, tried to use logic to build a diagram of living things. But he realized that living things could not be so easily apportioned. Instead, he constructed a ladder of nature or scale of perfection, which began with humans at one end and proceeded through animals and plants to minerals at the other end. Aristotle ranked these groups on a scale based on the four classical elements: fire, water, earth, and air.
When was Dutch elm disease first identified in North America?
Dutch elm disease was first identified in 1930 in Cincinnati, Ohio. The source of the fungus was shown to be elm logs imported from Europe. By 1940 the disease had spread to 9 states. By 1950 it was found in 17 states and had spread into southern Canada. Today it is found wherever elm trees grow throughout North America.
How do I know my enzymes are working?
Obviously, it is difficult to track the activities of the 20,000 enzymes that are required by your body. However, in the case of the enzyme amylase, you can easily check to see if it is working. Amylase is an enzyme in your saliva that starts the breakdown of complex carbohydrates into simple sugars, glucose and maltose. A plain cracker held in the mouth long enough will begin this breakdown, and you will actually begin to taste the sweetness of the enzyme products. Also, lysozyme is an enzyme present in your respiratory tract secretions and tears. It prevents invasion by bacteria, which explains why the warm, moist, open environment of our eyes manages to remain relatively infection-free during a normal day.
Where are bacteria found?
Bacteria inhabit every place on Earth, including places where no other organism can survive. Bacteria have been detected as high as 20 miles 32 kilometers above the Earth and 7 miles 11 kilometers deep in the waters of the Pacific Ocean. They are found in extreme environments, such as the Arctic tundra, boiling hot springs, and our bodies.
Are there more marine or freshwater sponges?
There are approximately 5,000 species of marine, saltwater, sponges and 150 species of freshwater sponges.
What other tree species has been adversely affected by a fungus?
Elm trees are susceptible to the fungus Ophiostoma ulmi, which causes Dutch elm disease. The fungus lives in the tubular cells present in the outermost wood of trees. As the cells become plugged, water and nutrients are not able to move from the roots to the top of a tree, and eventually the tree dies.
What bird has the biggest wingspan?
Three members of the albatross family, the wandering albatross, Diomede exculans, the royal albatross, Diomede epomophora, and the Amsterdam island albatross, Diomeda amsterdiamensis, have the greatest wingspan of any bird species with a spread of 8 to 11 feet, 2.5 to 3.3 m.
What is social Darwinism?
Social Darwinism is one of a number of perversions of Darwin-Wallace theory. These movements attempt to use evolutionary mechanisms as excuses for social change. Followers of social Darwinism believe that the survival of the fittest applies to socio-economic environments as well as evolutionary ones. By this reasoning, the weak and the poor are unfit and should be allowed to die without societal intervention. This idea has nothing to do with Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace but was promoted by Herbert Spencer, 1820 to 1903, and is related to the works of Thomas Malthus, whose work did indeed inspire Darwin. Although social Darwinism has faded as a movement, it did help to spur the eugenics movement of Nazi Germany as well as a number of laws and policies in the United States in the 20th century.
What is unique about the water lily Victoria amazonica?
It is very big. Found only on the Amazon River, this water lily has leaves that can reach up to 6 feet 1.8 meters in diameter. The flowers of Victoria amazonica reach up to 12,180 in, 30 centimeters in height and open at dusk, but only open on 2 successive nights.
Do all cells use the same source of energy?
Most cells use glucose as their primary energy source. But lipids and proteins can be broken down to provide energy as well. Lipids are catabolized to their monomers, glycerol and fatty acids, which are then metabolized within the pathways of cell respiration. Proteins are also catabolized to their amino acid building blocks, which are then fed into the process of glycolysis, also known as the Krebs cycle.
What is a transposon?
A transposon is a nucleotide sequence in a gene that literally jumps around from one chromosome to another. Transposons can be problematic, as they may disrupt the normal function of an important gene by their random insertion into the middle of that gene. However, transposons are found in almost all organisms, and their presence in a genome indicates that genetic information is not fixed within the genome. By studying results of the Human Genome Project, scientists predict that about 45% of all human genes may be derived from transposons.
How is Henry David Thoreau associated with the environment?
Henry David Thoreau, 1817 to 1862, was a writer and naturalist from New England. His most familiar work, Walden, describes the time he spent in a cabin near Walden Pond in Massachusetts. He is also known for being one of the first to write and lecture on the topic of forest succession. His work, along with that of John Muir, 1838 to 1914, and others, has served to inspire those others to understand the natural world and provide for its conservation.
How is biodiversity measured?
Biodiversity or biological diversity refers to the breadth of species represented within ecosystems or even on Earth as a whole. Biodiversity may be defined at three levels: genetic diversity, species diversity, and ecosystem diversity. Genetic diversity refers to the variety of genes found within a population or between populations of the same species. Species diversity may also be described as species richness.
How do T cells differ from B lymphocytes?
Lymphocytes are one variety of white blood cells and are part of the body's immune system. The immune system fights invading organisms that have penetrated the body's general defenses. T cells, responsible for dealing with most viruses, for handling some bacteria and fungi, and for cancer surveillance, are one of the two main classes of lymphocytes. T lymphocytes, or T cells, compose about 60 to 80% of the lymphocytes circulating in the blood. They have been educated in the thymus to perform particular functions. Killer T cells are sensitized to multiply when they come into contact with antigens, foreign proteins. on abnormal body cells, cells that have been invaded by viruses, cells in transplanted tissue, or tumor cells. These killer T cells attach themselves to the abnormal cells and release chemicals, lymphokines, to destroy them. Helper T cells assist killer cells in their activities and control other aspects of the immune response. When B lymphocytes, which compose approximately 10 to 15% of total lymphocytes, contact the antigens on abnormal cells, the lymphocytes enlarge and divide to become plasma cells. Then the plasma cells secrete vast numbers of immunoglobulins or antibodies into the blood, which attach themselves to the surfaces of the abnormal cells, to begin a process that will lead to the destruction of the invaders.
Do all animals have red blood?
The color of blood is related to the compounds that transport oxygen. Hemoglobin, containing iron, is red and is found in all vertebrates and a few invertebrates. Annelids, segmented worms, have either a green pigment, chlorocruorin, or a red pigment, hemerythrin. Some crustaceans, arthropods having divided bodies and generally having gills, have a blue pigment, hemocyanin, in their blood.
What are some common culinary herbs?
Herbs are often used to enhance flavors in food. They are usually from the leaves of non-woody plants.